Hi guys, Dave Wilson here again, and today I'll show you how I make these lovely Celtic stallion pendants. Solid silver, pierced design with an embossed Celtic pattern. I'm going to show you how I plan out the template and perfect the design, how I apply this embossed texture and some alternatives, and lots of great tips on choosing the right saw blades and using a piercing saw. So let's get started. Follow me. To begin, I need a pattern. I googled stylised horse and I've picked out a few images that appeal. Remember though, you can't just steal copyrighted designs, so I'm going to create my own, just using these for inspiration. I love this outline, but it's a little too plain for me. I love this more dramatic shape, so I definitely want to go longer and more pointed. I like the idea of somehow highlighting the hair so it stands out. This image is really great. I love these ripples along the edge here, but I need to simplify this a lot. If I cut out some of these shapes, I can perhaps create the impression of the mane. Notice how on this one, this line defines the jaw, so I'll include that too. Once I've got a rough design, I need to check that I can drill a hole into each of these shapes. On the computer I can measure these gaps. I also don't want to cut away too much or make it weak, so I can move parts around to make it stronger and ensure that it will hang correctly and be balanced. I scale this to 1.5 inches long and print several copies onto self-adhesive labels. Now, I always like to design on the computer because it allows me to scale the design and replicate it, so it's convenient. But don't panic, if you don't have all this computer gear, you can just use a pencil, so don't worry about it. Because I'm going to be cutting holes in it, I need it to be very strong. Here I'm using 1.7mm thick sterling silver sheet. I made this myself by casting a flat ingot and then reducing it in the Pepe Ultra Mill. Alternatively, you should be able to buy thick sheet from your usual supplier. Either way, you need it to be annealed and fully polished before you add the texture. Here I've got a texturing plate. This is steel with a reverse Celtic pattern etched into it. This was made by Roberta Phil of Oregon Trail Silver, so check her out if you want one. I'll put a link below. It's important to protect your rollers from the steel plate, so underneath I'm using a sheet of scrap copper, my silver on the top. Close the rollers and give them an additional half turn, no more. There, lovely. Flip over the silver, and now I'm cushioning the top with a piece of card so I don't flatten the side I've just done. Same again. And you can see this beautiful Celtic pattern embossed into both sides. If you don't have a mill or texturing plates, you can use 101 different things. You could use a ball peen hammer, punches, impressor, texture punches, basically anything that makes a mark. So just be creative. Using my pattern, I want to place it close to the edge and hopefully I can get a couple of pendants out of this one piece. Peel off the back of the label and stick it down firmly. I'm now ready to start sawing, but what size saw blade do I use? This is something that many people struggle with. Well, the first thing you need to do is to Google piercing saw chart and get one of these tables. You can see they range from 8.0, which is the smallest blade, down to 8, which is the largest. And you'll see here the corresponding thickness that each blade should be used for. You need at least 3 teeth across the thickness of your metal. That's why a big blade on thin metal just snags. So if you're having problems, use a finer blade with more teeth per inch. To cut my outline, I'm going to use a number 8. This is a thick, strong blade and less likely to break. Very, very important tip, guys. Buy decent blades. I hated sawing because I just kept breaking blades. Why? Because I was using cheap Indian blades. Eventually I just threw them all out and bought some Swiss Valor blades, and now I quite happily spend all day sawing. I love it. So don't buy cheap blades. Valor Swiss. That's all you need to know. Another great tip, plastic test tubes with screw caps. I got these off eBay, perfect. Just make sure you get them long enough. Saw frames. Every jeweller in the world probably has one of these, your standard cheap piercing saw frame, and this is fine. There are some very expensive designer saws on the market nowadays, but remember, it's the blade that cuts, not the frame. Just buy decent blades. Here I have my cheap saw frame with a large number 8 Valor blade, and here I have a saw frame with an 8-0 very fine blade, again Valor. This saw is a Grobet or Grobe, not sure how you pronounce it, and these aren't expensive at all, but I do like the rubber grip on this, and these little levers make it faster to swap blades, but I wouldn't spend any more money than this. Insert the blade into the handle end with the teeth pointing towards the handle. If you run your finger away from the handle, you should feel it grabbing. Rest the saw on your bench peg and lean into the handle with your chest, just to bend it a little, and tighten the far end. This creates a tension on the blade and it should ping. Don't overdo it though. If it's really high pitch, it may be a little too tight and more likely to break. Very important, lubricate your blade. I use Pepe lube. It makes such a difference. But beeswax or even no candle. Now, I've seen a lot of people who have their bench pegs sloping down. Whatever works for you. But for drilling and piercing, you really need a flat, level surface. So I always have my bench pegs level. Ideally, it wants to be about mid-chest height. Hold the saw vertical. Your forearm should be parallel to the floor. Keep your wrist and your elbow still. And all you're doing is moving your forearm up and down gently, just bending at the elbow. Don't push or force it, let the saw do the work. Don't furiously jig up and down, you'll just break blades. Remember, the saw cuts downwards. You can almost let the weight of the saw just drop. Use the full length of the blade, not just the middle. Keep it vertical and keep your elbow tucked into your body. When you get to a tight corner, keep sawing up and down as you slowly turn the saw. Allow it to cut its way around the corner. Just stopping and turning the blade will break it. This is thick material, so it's making a lot of filings. I hold a small brush in my left hand and brush away the filings so I can see my pattern. When you get to the end, be careful to support both sides of your work. Notice how I'm keeping my blade in the centre of this hole here, so my metal is fully supported all round. Next is to cut these internal shapes. I start by using a centre punch in the middle of each shape. I'm using a 1mm drill here. Measure your blade or check the chart if you're unsure. Always lubricate your drill. Again, I'm using Pepe lube. It reduces friction and heat. Once again, very important, buy quality drills. I use Bush drills and burrs, nice and sharp. When they do eventually wear down, replace them. Don't struggle with cheap, blunt drills. It's false economy. Now, I should use the same large blade, but I want some really fine details in here to suggest the hair, and the number 8 blades just won't fit in here. So I'm going to cut these internal areas with an 8-0 blade. This is the finest and thinnest blade possible, and it will give me the finest detail. It will cut this thick material just fine. It just requires a lot more skill and practice to avoid breaking these fine blades. So if you're new to this, then stick with the larger suggested blades and just simplify your design a little bit. Insert the blade into the handle end as before, and I then push it through the hole from the back. This is why it's called a piercing saw. Again, I need to lean in and tension the blade and lubricate it, being extra careful now because I've got a heavy lump of silver hanging off the blade. Carefully cut out the shape as before let the saw do the work. When I'm done, release the end and remove the piece. Thread the blade through the next hole and continue. The bail can either be sawn out or simply drilled using a larger diameter drill and then cleaned up with a burr. And all done. If necessary, I can do a little adjustment with a set of needle files. In my case, I want to have the horse's head smooth, so before polishing I sand down the head area with 600 grit sanding drum and then with a rubber polishing point. I then polish with a felt wheel and Menzerner blue polish or Tripoli. I also polish around the holes, front and back, just to remove any sharp edges, carefully because I don't want to lose any of that Celtic texture. I could continue around the outside edges, but I prefer to use the bigger bench polisher. Note how I'm keeping the piece at 90 degrees to the wheel. I don't want to round off the edge. Next, I use the edge of the wheel just to polish that head area a little bit more. Insert a large jump ring, and in my case I always solder or weld everything. Up to you. A final very light polish all over with Menzerner yellow or rouge if you prefer on a very soft mop. A good clean and we're done. So guys, I hope you've picked up some tips there. Check out the rest of the channel for lots more tips, tools and projects, and have a go. Of course, if you prefer to own one of mine, then I'd be delighted to make one just for you. So check out the links in the description below. I've been Dave Wilson. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you real soon on the next video. Bye for now.